Hey everyone, we got to talk about the Greens. Before we begin, this episode might feel like a bit of an economics chat, and I know that it can sound dry and heavy, but stick with me. I'm not an economist. I'm not here to lecture. I'm just sharing how I see it. These are my experiences. These are my views based on my life, based on the businesses that I've run in property and finance and having a family. And I think it's important to get these ideas out there. We just need to talk about the Greens. What are they really about? Are they about saving the planet or standing up for renters? There's definitely some good intention there. And I've met plenty of people who either volunteer for the Greens or vote for the Greens. But in my opinion, what's underneath their branding is something, I guess, way more radical. And if you look at their policies, so not their sales pitch, but their policies, I think it becomes clear that they're pushing an economic model that's not just impractical. In my opinion, it's actually dangerous. Now, you're listening to Sean Oscar Presents. That's me. No spin, no agenda, just honest conversations, my opinion. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with someone who you think is curious about this stuff. And don't forget to tell me that I'm wrong. I love that. Okay, so people reckon that sometimes I sound a bit grumpy in these episodes. So today I've taken a deep breath and I promise not to yell. No guarantees, of course. But I've had a chamomile tea. And in my opinion, when you see the way some of these policies are being spun, it's hard not to get fired up. So let's start here. Firstly, I don't think either major party has it together. Labor is handout heavy for my liking, and they are too left-leaning, and to use an already worn-out expression, in my opinion, they're too woke. But that's for me. Obviously, I'm not that way inclined. Liberals, well, they've just got too much influence from big business. And they're obviously tied in with property developers, and they are also compromised. So neither one of them are putting forward a plan that actually builds long-term financial stability. They're selling Band-Aid solutions to win votes. They've got the big headlines and the big sort of vote-grabbing punchlines that go on the front page of newspapers. And both parties do that, and the Greens do this as well. Now, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm not team red, blue, or green, but I do want to call things as I see them. And today, I'm just onto the Greens. I want to just go through what they're about. Maybe I'll do another episode about Labor or Liberal, but today, I just want to go through the Greens. I've seen so many posters around the neighbourhood, and I've got, like I said, I'm from Melbourne, and I've got a lot of friends who vote Greens. And to me, I just wanted to dissect it a little bit. So whether you realise it or not, in my opinion, again, the Greens vote is a vote for a kind of socialism. And if that's what you want, hey, go for it. But I think a lot of the voters out there don't realise that that's what they're being sold. The package doesn't match the product. And when you delve deeper into the people who actually represent the Greens, you also see that beyond their clean-cut image on TV, in the background, you see kind of some quirkiness.
I would do is put dental into Medicare. Second thing I would do is put mental health properly into Medicare. Then I would wipe student debt. I don't know if I've got enough V-Bucks. Clive would have plenty. Clive Palmer would have plenty of V-Bucks, wouldn't he? Yes. Get rid of mutual obligations. Raise all income support above the poverty line because people are in a meat grinder.
And I'm not sure everyone actually has seen that or is aware of that when they vote. They don't use terms like socialism. They won't say that. They prefer to use terms like equity or climate justice or freedom. But the policies behind the language tell the real story. Adam Bandt, leader of the Greens, authored his university thesis on Karl Marx. And then he put a 3-year suppression order on it to hide it from public view.
Google it, mate.
Now, why would he do that? He states it's because he intended to publish the book and he didn't want anyone basically copying his homework. But it could be because communism is not terribly popular. It doesn't test well with focus groups, probably because Australia has historically fought wars against it. Also, the word Nazi means National Socialist German Workers' Party. So I think the ideologies that the Greens adopt have negative connotations in our current society, and truthfully, they just want to distance themselves from it. I have always had a problem with politicians who don't tell you who they really are. And to me, and for my mind, the Greens are a socialist party, but they never actually state that. So let's break down some key points and take a look at what they say, and let's compare the sell with the reality and see how socialist it is. I'll go through on this podcast free university, housing policies, culture of government waste, the climate, the anti-Australian sentiment, and of course, the dreaded immigration conversation. I'll bring up 6 points. We'll just go through them and compare what they're selling with what's actually behind it. Now, look, I agree with the principle of big businesses getting taxed fairly and that tax money going back into society. That's not controversial. But let's stop pretending that free university is some utopia. It's not free. It's taxpayer funded. And once the government foots the bill, they control the curriculum. It becomes like applying for movie funding in Australia. If you don't tick the diversity boxes, and I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, but if you don't include LGBTQ plus characters or meet Screen Australia's mandatory inclusion criteria, your project won't get up. You can look all this up online. Take Thor, the most recent Thor movie, Love and Thunder. They had some funding controversy. Even though it was a Hollywood film, it received $24 million in Australian taxpayer funding. Why the hell does this movie get government funding? And viewers, please remember this. If there is a Doge-style Elon Musk government department in Australia, just imagine the noise that these actors and their producers would create on their Insta Reels. Imagine all the drama that they would kick up and all the propaganda that they would throw against something like this.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility for every unchecked moment.
For every time it was easier to ignore than to call it out for what it was.
Now, I'm not defending Elon Musk. I'm not trying to make this pro-Trump or anything like that. I'm just saying that if you know that there's $24 million spent on a Thor movie...
Kids, get the popcorn out.
Imagine how much influence one of those $1 million could buy. Imagine the news articles, imagine the Instagram conversations and the influence that could press against someone who tried to stop that funding. So back to Thor, they had to openly promote diversity as a core part of its narrative. That's including the race and sexuality-based casting. If you think that it's a creative decision to put these, people in the movie, you're wrong. It's influenced by what governments are willing to fund and promote. The same logic applies to education. Say you want to study a course, it'll need to meet government-approved guidelines. That's not education, that's indoctrination. Do you really think that your free university course won't come with Welcome to Country at the start? Now, you might be all for that, but some Australians actually want a choice. Now, the government-funded courses would have to meet all these different criteria. And this, again, in my opinion, is tantamount to communistic education, where the state decides what knowledge is valuable, what ideology is correct, and what future paths are worth funding. And based on the Greens' track record, it's pretty clear which direction they'd take it. They'd go fully blown woke. So while free uni sounds great, it's not really, in my humble opinion. Now, if we move along to housing policies, if you look at what they're proposing and what they're selling in regards to affordable housing policies, which is rent freezes, taxpayer-funded mega housing developments, wiping out negative gearing, wiping out capital gains tax, it's pretty clear what direction they're heading. Tax the rich, tax the rich. What does that even mean? And who are the rich? The truth is, a lot of these ideas sound good to a certain voter base, young, idealistic, university educated, often in public or arts sectors, most inner city based. Many of them are dealing with mental health challenges, rising costs, and feeling that the system has failed them. So they run out and scream, tax the rich. And I get it. But more handouts and more bureaucracy, more dependency, that is not a solution. Getting back to the socialist aspect of this, let's go over the sales pitch on housing. I want to take a moment to give you a simple example here because I'm not sure if you guys really understand two taxes, capital gains tax and negative gearing. So before I show you these two videos that I want to show you, I just want to give you some simple understanding of these two taxes, because this is what the Greens are proposing that the Australian government hands out when they say we give $176 billion worth of kickbacks to investors. But let's take a look at negative gearing, and I'll give you a tax example. So please bear with me on this example. Let's say you earn $150,000 from your job and you buy an investment property that rents out for $500 a week. I'm going to use round numbers here to make it nice and easy. That's $26,000 a year you get in rental income. But your mortgage and your interest on your loan and the rates and other costs comes to $36,000 a year. So to have your investment property, you're out of pocket $10,000 for the year. You got in $26,000, but you had to spend $36,000. So negative gearing means that you can deduct $10,000 from your taxable income. Sounds pretty okay to me. Instead of paying tax on $150,000, you pay tax on $140,000 because you actually made a bit of a loss on your investment property. So if you have a marginal tax rate of 45% plus the 2% Medicare levy, that's $10,000 that you've lost, and you convert that into the tax losses, you're going to actually save $4,700 in tax. You're still out of pocket, but the tax office softens the blow. Now, is that a handout? How is that different from a carpenter claiming his nail gun? Is that a handout? People have made an effort to use their money to try and make an investment, to try and build an income. And that is tax deductible. So when the government gives that money a discount, calling it a handout, I think that's blurring the lines.
That when that person goes to try and buy a house, they're locked out in a property market where house prices are turbocharged because property investors get billions of dollars in tax handouts from Labor that drive up house prices and deny millions of renters the chance to buy a home. Now, I put it to every member in this place that in a massive housing crisis where we hear the talk about needing to build more housing, why is it that we're giving $176 billion in tax handouts to property investors to hoard housing mostly that's already been constructed when we could put that money towards building hundreds of thousands of good quality homes that we then rent and sell at prices people can actually afford?
Now let's take a look at this other example. Again, I know this is a little bit heavy, but I just want to get through this capital gains tax example. So capital gains is really simply a gain that you make on the value of your capital. So imagine that, again, if you earn $150,000 a year, you bought an investment property for $500,000. 5 years later, you sell that for $700,000. So you've made a capital gain of $200,000. And since you held it for more than 12 months, you get a 50% discount on the capital gains tax. So instead of paying tax on the $200,000 you made, you only have to pay tax on $100,000. $100,000 gets added to your $150,000 salary. So now your taxable income becomes $250,000. And at that level, once again, at 47%, you're going to pay $47,000 in capital gains tax to the government. you still walk away with a profit, but that tax really bites. And without the discount, it would be double that. Now, would you call those tax offsets government handouts? If your property growth gets taxed at 47% for the first 12 months and 23.5% after that, would you call that a handout? For those not following this, I'll give it to you again. Imagine I said to you, okay, you can invest, but I don't want people flipping their investments. So I'm going to charge you, say, $10,000 if you flip the investment within 12 months, but I'll only charge you $5,000 if you flip it after 12 months. Now, is that a handout? I think this is a point of understanding on how money works. And Adam Bant and Max Chandler Mather, have demonstrated to me either a massive understanding about tax and money, or they are misleading the general population that don't really understand this by calling this a $176 billion tax handout.
Max Chandler Mather, how do you see yourself addressing this housing crisis if you're re-elected?
That's a twofold solution to this. One, right now, both the Labor and Liberal Party want to give property investors $176 billion in tax handouts over the next 10 years through negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount. Like, the government is literally giving property investors money to keep homes vacant.
Now let's watch Max win the audience over with the wordplay on this.
Is dying because of Labor's mismanagement of migration and housing.
But that didn't just happen over the last 3 years.
That's just fundamentally not true. And it doesn't, the facts don't even lay that out.
Those are numbers.
Let Max speak.
With respect, we had an experiment on what happens in this country when we have zero migration, net zero migration. And it was during COVID. And house prices went up at the fastest rate we've seen in decades. There's a study that found that in between 2019 and 2023, the number of students coming to this country internationally decreased at the same time as rents went up 30%. You'll find both sides of politics in a race to the bottom on migration because they don't want to deal with the real structural issues in our housing crisis. And you talk about competition at auctions, it comes from property investors who have big tax handouts in their pocket in the form of negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount. Over the next 10 years, both sides of politics will give $176 billion, sometimes to property investors with 20 or 30 homes. Okay. And that means it's easier to buy their 21st than it is for someone to buy their first. And that's the kernel of injustice at the heart of our housing system.
So again, it sounds awesome to say billions of tax handouts to wealthy investors. And he speaks with passion. And what about the self-employed people in this country? They have to pay their own superannuation. They have to pay their own retirement planning. So using the idea about people pulling money out of their super to invest, this is only appealing to, it's almost as though he doesn't even understand that self-employed people exist. These people need to invest in real estate. It's an avenue that they can pursue. But in their world, it's as though they don't even exist. People who don't do anything but work for the government, get their 9 or 10% superannuation guarantee, they don't really even come into these people's mind. So here's another example. Take a look at this house pricing video from Adam Bant.
If it's migration that is driving the housing crisis, then why didn't house prices fall when there was COVID and there was no migration into this country?
I think this video highlights Adam Bant's lack of understanding of how house prices are affected by monetary supply. During COVID, the government printed money like it was nothing. Rates dropped to near zero. The money flowed into the system, not just into spending, but into assets, properties, shares, crypto. This is basic economy 101. Supply of money goes up, assets inflate. But the Greens blame everything on the tax breaks. It's not the full picture. Negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts were not the cause of this boom. Cheap money was. We're being told that the way to fix housing is to punish investors. But investors are the ones building and providing supply. It's like blaming a cook for making the meal too well. Let's zoom out for a minute here. Australia already has one of the most progressive tax systems in the OECD. The top 10% of income earners pay more than 45% of all the income tax in the country. That's a bit unfair, don't you think? That 10% of our country pays 45% of the income tax for the whole country? That's not nothing. And yet we're constantly hearing tax the rich like it's a silver bullet. But who, again, are the rich? A small business owner making 200 grand before expenses? A couple looking forward to retirement in their 40s or 50s with a second investment property, trying to build for retirement? These people are not evil. We need to stop treating the middle class like it's the enemy. The real inequality isn't between you and your neighbor. It's between you and the systems that waste your tax dollars. Which brings me to my third point here. There is a major culture of inefficiency and waste. And this is not just the Greens, but they love the aspect of government spending, creating a culture of reliance. And as I've said before, people dependent on the system will always argue about what handouts they're going to get. They're not going to argue about who is giving them the handouts. We are creating a split working class in this country. It used to be public and private sectors. Unfortunately, now, a lot of private sectors are working on government contracts. So they are reliant on the government deals. Government compliance has quagmired corporate productivity. And so what do I mean by that? I mean HR departments that are overblown, pronouns on your signatures, all of these things that contribute to inefficiencies within a business. They might contribute to happiness, and you could argue that it creates a nice working environment, but it's all a tax on doing business. And eventually, when these massive private corporate companies get so much government money, it makes it nearly impossible for the businesses that don't deal with government work to compete. If you're trying to hire someone and they have the choice of working for a government organization or a private corporate organization that works with the government, they are getting a lot more benefits than they are working for the local mechanic. And that makes small business really tough in this country. All these leave allowances, there's so many different things now. And if you get to work for the government, you can get even more. You basically can't be sacked, and you get 12% or maybe more superannuation. Again, it's making the small businesses hard to compete. Let's be honest now. We all know someone who gets paid a huge income and literally would not be noticed if they did not show up for work. This is a kind of wage theft, and inefficiency adds up to destruction of productivity and pushes us towards a welfare nation. Now, a welfare nation does what it's told. It's evident who the Greens want to hurt: anyone that is not under the government's thumb. And this is what happened during COVID. If you look at who was most hard to control, who was most difficult to get to comply, small businesses. All the big businesses and corporations did exactly what they were told. They straight out ignore, well, the governments that is, straight out ignore anyone that works for themselves or anyone that has built any business or wealth. Every solution that they put forward involves more government payments, less productivity, and attacking those who have the smallest of nest eggs and calling them evil. It's backwards. They treat anyone who has built anything as someone to be hurt. And if you don't believe me on this point, look at this inheritance tax. Now, Greens go to great effort to tell us that there is nothing to see here. But we then go to their website and we have a look. And if you look here, it says under point 6, the implementation of tax on dynastic wealth targeted at those bequeathing or gifting large amounts. So is that basically saying, on one hand, please don't freak out, we aren't going to be doing an inheritance tax, we aren't going to tax you for when your family passes money down to you, but then on the other hand, putting on their website as one of their goals to tax dynastic wealth, which is wealth from a dynasty? This sounds contradictory, and it seems like they're not being upfront and honest with us. And again, I don't care if that's really what they want to do, but just tell us that's what you want to do. Sorry, I'm trying to stay calm here. Now, I don't want to be out unkind as well. I see DJ Bant out there as DJ Adam spinning at the Nightcat and playing this banger. I used to do drugs, now I don't do anything. I used to have fun, now I don't do anything. And I'll be honest, I rate the set. It seems like a genuinely fun guy and good DJ, but DJing in a warehouse gig is one thing, setting economic policy is another, and all this government spending causes inflation, and that is the real enemy. If you want to see just how much inflation really is the enemy, take a look at this graph. Let me put this in perspective. In 1980, the average household income was about $20,000, and a Big Mac cost $1.25. In 2025, the average household income is around $110,000, and a Big Mac costs about $8.50. So your money is still buying the same amount of stuff. We're buying a whole lot more stuff, if I'm honest. And I have another video on this, the spending crisis, which I'll put the link up to in the corner. But getting back to this, our gross domestic product has gone up, and most of our GDP growth comes from population growth and government spending, not value creation. And this is why we're in the spot we're in, because we're pumping money into an economy that produces nothing. And we create these things called subsidies loops. You could literally pay someone to dig a hole and then pay someone else to fill it back in, and it would show up as GDP growth. That's what I'm trying to explain here, is that we get in these situations where we are spending money and pumping money into the community and no products are being produced. It's make work theatre. It's not meaningful productivity. That's not productivity. That's theatre, okay? So I want to go on to another angle here that the Greens love, which is climate action. Now, you would see climate action pictures all over the country. They're everywhere, on fences, windows, bumper stickers, and I get it. I want meaningful climate action too. But here's where I think we need to be honest. What exactly do they mean by climate action? Because if you look at what the Greens and affiliated groups are pushing, it's not just about protecting the environment, is it? It's a whole bunch of bureaucratic framework. Again, more government. And it's all built on new taxes, compliance tools, restrictions, and control. We're talking carbon pricing schemes that increase your power bills, mandates that push electric vehicles, whether the infrastructure exists or not, and buzzwords like smart cities, which often means digital surveillance, zoning restrictions, and centralized planning. It's not action, it's administration. It's not innovation, it's interference. What's missing from the conversation is real energy progress. We need a real discussion about, I dare say it, nuclear power, scalable renewables, better battery tech, incentives for private sector innovation, and none of that seems to be on the table. Instead, the climate conversation has been captured by slogans, not science, and that's dangerous because real climate action should make our country stronger, not more fragile. I see climate action now signs everywhere, but when you dig into what is proposed, it's not trees and clean air. It's carbon credits, digital IDs, forced EV adoption, surveillance, smart cities, a lot of tax, and more socialism. What we're not getting is energy innovation, carbon capture, or nuclear power, like I said, that no one wants to talk about. We're not talking about new ideas, it's just compliance. And the problem I have with things like nuclear power is, to be honest, we can't have a straight debate about this because there are so many vested interests in this subject. So we never really know what the truth about this is, and that worries me. Okay, what else have we got on the Greens here? This is another situation that I see with the Greens, which is the anti-Australia sentiment. Let's take a step back and really think about what these guys stand for. They don't just want to change a few policies. They want to reshape the entire national identity. They proudly support Invasion Day rallies, which go far beyond protesting the date of Australia Day. The message often frames Australia and the very founding of modern Australia as an act of violence and illegitimacy. And that's cool. Like I said, well, it's not cool, but it's okay if that's what you really believe. But I know when talking to my neighbour the other day that she is, in one hand, very Australian, celebrating Australia Day, loves Australia Day, and she's also voting for the Greens. I'm not sure she's aware of this. So that's, I guess, what we need to look at here. And if we're being honest, it leaves very little room for national unity. Then came recently, as you'll see in the news now, they're having a rave on Anzac Day, a fundraiser marketed with slogans like F the war, with most Australians spending that day in quiet reflection, honouring the sacrifices of men and women who gave everything. Greens supporters were gearing up to throw a party. Now, is that really a tribute to peace, or is that a protest for the sake of protest's sake? Is it there to just upset the apple cart? You add this to their push to rename the towns and landmarks and their repeated calls to return the land and policies that encourage land handovers to Aboriginal groups. It's a vision of not just reconciliation, but rewiring everything we associate with being Australian. And let's not forget Adam Bant, leader of the Greens, who recently posted JFC, short for Jesus effing Christ, while promoting drug decriminalisation. Now, imagine that reaction if a politician used any other religion's God's name in a tweet like that. There'd be global outrage, you know? Like, I think that this attack on Christianity is also apparently fair game. So when you put this together, you start to wonder, are the Greens really interested in uniting and improving Australia, or are they just trying to tear it all down and start over? I mean that. I want to know. And if you're a Green supporter or volunteer, let me know. What is your ideal vision of this country? Do we need to literally start again? Does everything really need to go back to the Indigenous people of the First Nations? I just want you to tell me what you're really thinking. But when the pattern that we see looks more like rejection and than reform, which is really what I see, when it feels more like a demolition than a dialogue, we've got to ask ourselves as voters, is this really the party that we want to vote for? Is Australia really the vision of the Greens? I don't know. Now, the last point I want to raise here is one that no one in the media or politics will touch. It's immigration policy, because it's considered racist or xenophobic. And let's be clear, immigration has always been and always will be part of Australia's story. There's a difference between a healthy immigration policy and what we're seeing now. A turbocharged, unstrategic intake that's having serious unintended consequences. Let's look at the numbers. In 2023 alone, Australia brought in 500,000 net migrants. That's more than double the pre-COVID average. That's the largest single-year intake our country's ever had in its history. So for context, we're adding the equivalent of a city the size of Canberra every 12 months. And this has two massive effects, and neither are being addressed by the Greens. First, is the cultural dilution of Australian identity worth it? Is that what we're trying to do? If you bring over 500,000 people a year with no meaningful effort to promote assimilation or shared values, you don't really get diversity. You get fragmentation. And come on, we've all seen this. You don't have to go too far to see fragmented cultures in our society. As someone who was raised in an immigrant family, we were Italians, we came to this country, we were encouraged to assimilate. My dad, when he got his Australian citizenship, he got a meat pie and a can of Foster's, and that was the neighbour's way of saying welcome to becoming an Aussie and embracing our culture. It's not like that today, and I think everyone can see it. So why aren't we able to talk about it? You know, it becomes harder to maintain a common story and shared norms or basic civic agreement if we have this. And when the Greens promote identity politics and ethnic division rather than unity, I think it only accelerates that decline. This isn't about race. It should be about culture, shared language, shared ethics, shared history. And if you erode that, what holds us together? And I think another more pressing situation for Australians is housing. More people means more demand, and we just don't want to admit this. I don't know why it's such a confusing situation or such a confusing question to ask. If we have more people coming in, we have more demand without matching the supply, we're going to get higher prices, lower availability, and you don't need a degree in economics to understand that. A recent report from PropTrack, which is a property tracking website, said that about 70% of housing demand in the major cities over the past 2 years is from migration. Yet new housing supply is lagging way behind that. And you add to that the construction slowdowns, the materials shortage, the planning restrictions. The housing crisis isn't a mystery, it's a maths problem. And what's the Greens' response? More open borders, more welfare, tighter environmental building restrictions, none of which do things to address the demand of housing availability. If anything, their policies make it harder to own and harder to build. So how does this link in with socialism, which is what I guess my first point was? Well, what we're seeing from the Greens isn't just bad economic management, it's creeping socialism. Open border immigration policy combined with resistance to private development, calls for rent caps, taxpayer-funded public housing, all point towards a centralized, state-controlled vision of society. This is the classic socialist playbook stuff. Overload the system with demand, create crisis, and then sell the state intervention as the only solution. You flood the country with 500,000 people a year, mostly into the cities, mostly into the rental market, and of course there's going to be a housing crunch. But instead of allowing the market to respond by encouraging more building, faster approvals, or private investment, the Greens, and maybe not just the Greens, want state-owned housing, more rent control, and more restrictions. So you see, I'm hoping that this is sort of landing, that this is like a perfect storm. Push a whole bunch of people, make it hard to build, create a problem, and then have the government come to the rescue. It's every failed socialist experiment across the world. We've seen this. Manufacture the problem, expand the government power as the fix. And here's the kicker. Under this model, the average person doesn't get more freedom, more choice, or more prosperity. They get more dependency. Dependency on the state for housing, dependency on the state for income, dependency on the state for identity. And the more dependent people become, the easier they are to control. It's not about lifting people up. It's about pulling everyone into the same level of government. Managed mediocrity. That's not progress, and I really don't like it. That's not equality. That's soft communism. Okay, that's it from me. And well done if you made it this far. Thanks so much for listening. If you disagree, perfect. Chuck it in the comments. Let's have a discussion. I really want to have this conversation. It's been bugging me for a long time. As for who you should vote for, I'm not the person to ask. I have no idea. We are in a spot in this country, that's for sure. One thing I do know is that it's a problem. And these conversations need to bring about better policy and more accountability from our governments. So if there's another Greens party where there's some mad DJs, I'd love to come. Maybe I'll bring some graphs along. Anyway, see you next time. Thanks.